Boker Tov. Today's Daf Yomi is Bava Metzia Daf Beis, and we're going to start the new Masechta of Bava Metzia. And we pray that this Masechta be a Yeshua for Am Yisrael in this difficult time, a Shmira for the Chayalim, Hatzalah for the Shvuyim. So it says in our Mishnah, Bava Metzia Beis Amid Aleph, as we start the new Masechta, Shnayim Ochsim B'Talis, that two people are grabbing a hold of a talis. It means a garment. And Rashi says specifically Ochsen, they're both grabbing a hold of it. That both of them are saying, we are the ones who are in possession of it. And this one does not have more strength than the other one. Because if it would be in the hands of one person by itself, then the other one would have to bring a proof. Motzi michavero. And you have to bring a proof with witnesses. And he wouldn't just be believed to take an oath. Shnayim ochsim bezeh. Zeh omer. Shnayim ochsim betalis. One of the most famous Mishnayos in all of our shas. Two people are holding a garment. Zeh omer ani mitzatia. Zeh omer ani mitzatia. This one says, I found it. This one says, I found it. Zeh omer kula shali. V'zeh omer kula shali. And the Gemara is going to discuss whether this is one case or two cases, but this one says it's entirely mine, and this one says it's entirely mine. Then, each one should take an oath that he has at least 50% of it. This one should take an oath that he does not have less than 50%. This one should take an oath that he does not have less than 50% via choku, and then they should divide it. Zelmer kula shali. This one says the entire talis is mine. Zelmer chatzia shali. So in this case, this one claims the entire talis is his, and this one claims only half of it is mine. Haomer kula shali. The one who says it's entirely his. Yishava she'en ba pachos mishlosha chalakim. He should swear that he has at least 3/4 of it. Omer Chatzi Sholi, and the one who says it's half mine, Yishava She'en Ba Pachos Miravia. He should swear that he at least has 1/4 of it. And then Zenotel Shlosha Chalakim, this one should take 3/4, Zenotel Ravia, and the other one takes 1/4. Now we have the next case, and again the Gemara is going to discuss what's the chiddush of these next few cases. Two people are riding on an animal. Or one is the rider and one is the leader of the animal. Each one claims the entire animal to themselves. So each one should claim that they have a minimum of 50% of this animal, but at a time where they admit, and the Gemara is going to have to discuss what's the chiddush of this, in time where they admit, or where there are witnesses, then they divide it up without an oath. The Gemara is going to explain what the chiddush of this last case is, that where they both admit that. And the Gemara is going to explain what that case is referring to. So now we start with the Gemara of Bava Metzia. Now normally when we start Masechtos, the Masechtos are like introductory Masechtos because it's a completely new topic. But as many commentaries point out, really Bava Metzia and Bava Kama and Bava Basra are really one long Masechta. And so this is just a natural continuation of Bava Kama. So we don't have those introductory format that we have in the other Masechtas. We don't have like a psicha. So Lama Lila Mishnah, so asks the Gemara, why? Let's just try and explain our Mishnah. Why does our Mishnah need to say Ze Omer Ani Mitzasiyah, Vize Omer Ani Mitzasiyah? This one says I found it, And this one says, I found it. Zelmer Kushli, Vizelmer Kushli. And then why does it have to say that this one is all mine and this one is all mine? Listening Chada, the Tana should just say one claim, meaning to say each one should just say, I found it, or each one should just say it's all mine. Why does one have to say, I found it? It's all mine. Why don't we always worry that the Mishnah should be taught in as brief and precise language as possible. So it could just say one case. So the Gemara says, you're right. Chada Katani. The Gemara is saying it's really one claim. Ze omer ani mitzasia v'kuashali, v'ze omer ani mitzasia v'kuashali. So, meaning to say, at first, the Gemara, as the Rashba explains, the Gemara at first thought that the Mishnah is talking about two separate cases with one found object. So one is with a found object and one is with a different object. And each one says about the found object, I found it. And in this second case, it's talking about a case of just regular business, and each one is saying it's all mine. And so then the Mishnah is telling us, no, says the Gemara. The Mishnah is telling us that it's really one case. This one says, I found it, vikuashali, ani mitzatia, and it's all mine. Vizelmer ani mitzatia vikuashali. And this one says, I found it, and it's all mine. So the Gemara then asks the question, if that's the case, listening, ani mitzasia, why doesn't it just say, I found it, v'ana yadana tekuashali? And once it says, I found it, I would know that, of course, it's all mine. If you found it, it's yours, if that's your claim. And the other one should say, I found it, and I would know that it's all mine. So the Gemara says, no, that wouldn't work. Itana, if it just said, I found it, Havamina, I might have thought, my mitzasia, what does it mean when he says, I found it? Re'isia, meaning to say, I saw it first. Like, who gets that parking spot? The one I saw that spot, or the one who pulls in and is standing there? No, I might have thought that I saw first. And even though it didn't come into my hands, I might have thought that just by seeing it by itself, that's enough for me to acquire it. So therefore, for that reason, Tanakua Shali, it tells us in the Mishnah, the entire thing is mine, meaning to say the B'ri'iyah Lokani. It's to teach us this chiddush from the fact that it says split it, that just seeing it is not an effective way of acquiring it. So the Gemara says, would you really have ever thought that saying I found it means that I saw it? V'amar Rabbanai. So some changes, the Marshal changes this to Ravina, because the name Rabbanai is not a typical name in the Gemara. In fact, I don't know that it appears elsewhere, but Bach also changes it when it appears on Daf Chav Zayin and in Bava Kama. So some say that this is a reference to the Savorayim, a later edition. Anyway, this is an unusual name that we come across. So Amar Rabbanai umitzasa to asa liyade mashma. So the Gemara says, why would you think mitzasiya's ritzi is that I saw it? But didn't Rabbanai say that when it says umatzasa in the pasuk, it says for every object that you found, the asal yada mashma means that you actually have it, not that you saw it. So the Gemara says in umatzasa dekra the asal yada mashma. You're right. When it says umatzasa in the pasuk, it means that you actually had it in your possession. However, Tana Lishna da Amad Nakat. And our Tana is just using the language of the world. Nakat umidach Nakat. So therefore, he's just using the language of the world. And as a consequence of that, umidamilsele. Amar ana ashkachis. And the language of the world is when somebody says, oh, I saw it, he says, I found it. So therefore, the language of the world is when somebody says, oh, I saw it, I found it, that means that I think it's theirs. And so therefore, the Tana says, Vikua Shali, to teach us the B'ri'iyah Ba'alma Lo Kanile, that just by seeing it, he has not acquired it. See, Rashi tells us that Rabbanai is a name that appears in Bava Kama, which we just had 6 days ago. So we should have remembered that, obviously. Okay, so now Gemara says, "V'lisna kua shali v'lobai ani mitzasiyah." Well, then the language of the Mishnah could just say it's all mine, and it doesn't have to say I found it. Why does it have to say? Why does it have to say both expressions? Mar says, "Itana kua shali." No, because if it just said it's all mine, hava mina ba'alma tikatani mitzasiyah b'riya ba'alma kani. I might have said in general, when it says that I found it, it means just by seeing it. So therefore, Tana ani mitzasiyah v'hadar Tana kula shali. I mean, Mishnah Yisera Shminan Deriya Lokani. So it says the double expression, I found it, it's all mine, to teach us from the extra words that just seeing by itself is not a form of acquisition. The Gemara says, now, do we really want to say, Umi Matis Amris Chadakatani, that it's really one claim, it's really one case, that the Tana is teaching us one claim, I found and it's all mine. But the Mishnah says, meaning to say, he repeats zeh twice, I found it, and also this is all mine. And if it was just one case, he could have said zeh omer mitzasiyah v'kol shali, and that would have saved the repetition. Doesn't the repetition prove to us that it's two cases? So that's the Gemara's question. So, Omer Zelmer ani mitzasiyah, v'zelmer ani mitzasiyah, zelmer kushli, v'zelmer kushli. So how do we answer that? So says Rav Papa, the Item Rav Shimon bar Ashi, Ramila Chadi. Chadi is another name that some attribute it to a person, and some say it just means like in passing. This is a machokas we have throughout Shas. So how do we answer it? Reisha b'mitzia v'seifa b'mekach u'memkar. Gemara now reverses the idea that these are both the same case. Rather, we're talking about the first cases where a person, each one claims I found it, and the latter cases where each one claims it's all mine when they purchased it, and he says I purchased it from the seller. And the Mishnahs come and tell us that in both cases they divide it, and each one has to take an oath. And says the Gemara on the top of Beis Amar Beis, we need both of these cases. We need the chiddush of both cases. The Tana Metzia, if we just had the case of I found it, or on the top of Beis Amar Beis, as we march through these beautiful pages of Bava Metzia, if we just had the case of I found it, Havamina Metziahu Deramu Rabbanan Shvuoei Mishum Demori Ve'amar Chavrai Lav Midei Chaser Ba Ezo Atvis Vet Poeg Ba'ada. So he says that if the Gemara says if we just had the case of the found object, that's where the rabbis say he has to take an oath. Why? Because he's mori. What does the word mori mean? He's mora heterlatzmo, Rashi says. He thinks to himself that he could grab it even without going to court. And because why? What's his logic? He says to himself, Amar Chavrai Lav Midei Chaserbo. He says, my friend is not missing anything. Meaning, say, what's he doing? He found something just like I say I found something. And so therefore, I'll go and I'll also grab this object and I'll split it with him. Why should he get everything? And so therefore, the Chum said he has to take an oath and say that we don't want him to swear falsely. Therefore, the Chum take an oath so that he should withdraw his hand because he's not going to want to swear falsely. But by business, a person is not going to say, oh, I could just take it what he paid for. Aim alone, maybe we won't say that will make them take an oath because this one is one of them is an actual thief. And so they'll say there's no reason for him to prove to himself. And so therefore, he's also going to be suspected about swearing falsely. And so therefore, I might have thought that we should just leave it until Elijah comes. As we'll see on Daf Gimel, that that's one of the suggestions in a different scenario. V'itana mekach memkar. And if we just had the case of mekach memkar, well, let's just read the Rashi of mekach or deleko meimarachi. V'afagav shezeh gam hu nasan esamos mocher. Even though both of them gave the money to the seller, Rashi says that this refers to the case that we're talking about, where both gave the money to the seller, but the seller only sold it to one of them, and he doesn't know. And the seller says that one of them gave it willingly, and one gave against my will. I don't know who. And then when they split it, this one should take half the money, and this one should take half the money. Nevertheless, chisaron hu etzlo. The other guy is going to lose the money. Why? Because if he didn't need it, he wouldn't have tried to get his friend to sell it. And so therefore, the one who's coming and he's taking half the value without the law in his favor, he's not acting properly. So back to this case, the itana, and if we just had the second case of mekach or memkar, of this one says it's all mine, this one says it's all mine, which our Gemara says is now saying that it's a case of business, I would have said, who the Ramal Rabbanan Shvualei? In that case, the rabbi said that each one of them has to take an oath. And we're not concerned that each one took it without properly. Mishum demori. The Amar Chavre Demei Kayahiv, Va'ana Demei Kayahivna. Because in that case, that's where the rabbi said that they need to take an oath, each one, and we're not concerned that each one will swear falsely, because they're going to say he doesn't intend to steal it, and I'll say he's saying I'll allow himself to do it. He'll say because I gave money and he gave money, and so therefore each one will say I have a right to it. But now that I need this ashklei ana. The chavrei lezel v'chochlo has been. Let my friend go and take it from something else. Bava Metzia deleko meimer hachi. But in a case of a lost object where we can't say that, aimalo, I might think that there in that case we can't make them take an oath because this one of them is an actual robber, and so therefore he has no reason to take the oath that we're going to trust him. And so therefore we wouldn't allow them to take the oath. So the Gemara says, well, Mekach and Memkar, the Gemara just says almost like a coda to this beautiful opening piece. The Gemara says, well, if it's a case of sale, why don't we see who we took the money from? The Gemara says, no. We're talking about a case, we took the money from both of them. One of them, he took it with consent, meaning to say, he took it with the consent of the seller. And from one of them, the seller took the money against his consent. Meaning to say, he really only wanted to sell it to his friend. And we don't know, or mean to say, we don't know. And it's not clear if we don't know or if the seller doesn't know. There's different girses. We don't know who's the one who did it with the consent of the seller, and we don't know which is the one who did it against the will of the seller. And so therefore, since we don't know the law in this case, that's the circumstance. So now the Gemara says, Balema, the Gemara is going to now suggest that it's possible that our Mishnah is arguing with one of three other Mishnayos. And in this way, the Gemara is going to give us into a survey of some major positions throughout the laws of Nezikin. So we say, Lema Masnisan Delok Ben Nanas. Let's say that our Mishnah is not like the position of Ben Nanas. Because what's the position of Ben Nanas? Ben Nanas was a case that the Gemara deals with in Masechah Shavuos. That let's say there's a storekeeper who hired workers, and basically it's like this. There's a person who hires workers, and then there's a shopkeeper. And the owner who had hired the workers agrees with the shopkeeper he's going to pay them a certain amount of money for their work. And then afterwards, he's going to give the money to the shopkeeper. So the storekeeper, let's just read the Rashi. Rashi will say explicitly. But Masechah Shavuos, this refers to the case in Masechah Shavuos, Gabe Chanvani al Pinkaso, that there is a shopkeeper with his ledger. Elu ve'elu ba'al bezdin, al manas l'shavet. Both of them come to the court to take an oath. Echamem l'shav, and one of them is lying. Amar Baal Bayis l'chanvani. So the Baal Bayis says to the shore. The Baal Bayis says to the shopkeeper, Tein libni chitim b'dinar v'alai l'shalim. Ol po'olim b'sela mos shani chayav b'scharam v'alai l'tein sela. Either he says, give to me the wheat for a dinar and I'll pay for it, or give it to my workers for a sela and that I have to pay their work. And it's upon me to give this sela. Hu omer nasati, v'hu omer lo natalti. So one says I gave and one says I didn't. And both of them are making a claim against the Baal Bayis. Meaning to say that both of them are making a claim against the owner for this sela. So both of them will swear and take the money from the Baal Bayis. But Ben Nana says no. That's the position of the Rabbanon, that both of them swear and take the money from the Baal Bayis. But Nana says, how could that be? But one of them will be taking a false oath. So rather, in that case, both of them should not take an oath, and we should leave the money without an oath. So the Gemara says, Lema mas nisin deloka ben nanas. Let's say that our Mishnah is not like ben nanas. Di'i ben nanas. Ben Nana says in a case where one of them is for sure lying, how can we make both of them take an oath where for sure they're contradicting each other and one of them is lying? And so therefore, in this case too, one of them is for sure lying because neither one of them, both of them can completely have the Taoist. So therefore, Ben Nana should say that they don't take an oath. So it must be that our Mishnah is not like Ben Nana. So the Gemara says, no, afilu tema Ben Nanas. You could even say our Mishnah is like Ben Nanas. Hasam vada iko shvua shav. There in that case, there's two possibilities. Either the shopkeeper gave it or he didn't give it. And so therefore, Ben Nana says it's for sure a false oath. But here it's possible that they're not both lying because it's possible that they both grabbed it at the exact same time. And so therefore, they're not both lying. Each one thinks that they grabbed the whole thing. And then in that one, each one really is getting half the talis because they're only taking the oath that they have half of it. So it's possible that each one grabbed half. So now we have the next case that, and this is, let's say that our Mishnah is not like Sumchus, because what does Sumchus say? Sumchus is our old friend we had in Bava Metzia, and we're going to have it throughout Seder and Ezekiel. Let's say our Mishnah is not like Sumchus, because what does Sumchus say? Mamon amuto b'safek cholken below shvua. And this is the case that we had in Bava Metzia Memvav, where you have an ox that gores a cow, and then you found the pregnant cow, it was pregnant, and you find the fetus next to the cow. So the owner of the ox that gores claims that the cow gave birth beforehand, and so therefore he's not responsible to pay for the fetus, whereas the owner of the cow itself claims that the cow gave birth to the fetus after the goring, and it died as a result of the goring. So therefore, Sumcha says in that case, so in the Mishnah, Bava Kama, we say that the law is that they have to split it. But Rabbi Yehuda says in the name of Shmuel that this Mishnah is like Sumchas, who says that money that's mutal b'safek, that's in doubt, you divide it even without an oath. But the Chachamim say no, motzi mechaver olav araya, and the nizuk there has to bring a proof that the cow was born after the goring. So therefore, Lema must nisan, our Mishnah that says they have to take an oath must not be like Sumchas. The ikus Sumchas is if you want to say it's like Sumchas, then we could say Amar Sumcha says Maman amuto b'safek cholken below shvua. He says you divide it up without an oath. Gemara says, well, if that's the case, El my Rabbanan Ha'amri, the Rabbanan say Amotzi mechaver al varaya. The Rabbanan have the position that the burden of proof rests upon the one who wants to bring a proof, and as long as you don't bring a proof, you don't get anything. And so therefore, we should leave the talis until witnesses come. Nobody should get anything. Gemara says, Hi my, no, that case is totally different. Gemara says, there's our Mishnah, there's no contradiction to the Chum, there's only contradiction to Sumchus. If you want to say that our Mishnah is like the Rabbanon, there, both of them weren't in possession of it. And so therefore we could say, Amar Rabbanon, Motzi mechaver olav araya. Therefore the Rabbanon could say the burden of proof rests upon the one who wants to get it from the other person. But Achad the Travayu Tavsi, here both of them are seizing it. Then it makes sense to make them divided by an oath. Eliyamr's sumchas, but if you want to say our Gemara is like sumchas, just like over there, that you don't divide it up. Just like over there, where both of them are not holding it, that we divide it up without an oath. Here, where both of them are holding it, for sure should you say that they don't need an oath. Gemara says, no, afilu tema sumchus. You can even say our Mishnah is like sumchus. Ki amar sumchus, shema b'shema. When does sumchus say that you divide up without an oath? In the case where neither one of them could be absolutely certain, like the case of the cow, we don't know when it gave birth because they weren't there. And so therefore they divide up without an oath. Avabari v'bari lo amar. But in the case where both of them are certain, sumchus would say you need an oath. Or Rav bar Afuna da amar sumchus. Afilu bari ubari. What about Rav bar Afuna who says that Sumcha says you divide up without an oath even where both of them are certain? What would he say there? He says Afilu tema sumchus. You could even say that our Mishnah is like sumchus. Ki amar sumchus heika deika drara de memona. Heika deika jar de memona lo. So this is the case of drara de memona. Now we say, when does sumchus say this case? The word drara means ikar, according to the arach, means the main thing. So when does Sumchus say his position that you divide it up without an oath? In a circumstance where there's a loss of money, meaning to say that if we'll say that the mazik is exempt, then the nizak loses money. And if we're going to say he's responsible without cause, then we've cost him money. But where there's no drara de memona, where there's not loss of money, like they found something, then Sumchus would say that you divide up with an oath. Gemara says, in that case where they're going to both lose money, like there, Simla says you divide up without an oath. For sure, in this case, the eagle member, the travayu, that there here in this case where there's no Jordan Mona, that we could both say to the equal member to travayu, that we could both say that really applies to both of them for sure. Well, Kolshkin, for sure we should divide up without an oath. The Gemara says, Afilu tema sumchus. This, you could even say that this is the position of sumchus. But what we say, Shvu Azu midrabanan. So now we're saying that this oath is rabbinic. Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan, Shvu Azu takanas chachami. So yeah, koachad ve'echad hoech v'tokef v'taliso shel chaver v'omer shalihu. So in the end, the Gemara says, no, you could say that when Simcha says you divide up without an oath, that's biblically. But in this case, he's saying it's rabbinically that they have to take an oath, because we don't want, the rabbis made it takana, we don't want everybody to go around and say, just grabbing a hold of his friend's talis and saying it's all mine. So in order to stop that, we make them take an oath. So this is our asfala on Mesechas Bava Metzia. What a beautiful Masechta. If anybody has any questions, happy to address.